Texas!
Hey!
The room is packed today.
Super big. 15-minute standing ovation.
Yeah. Anyway, I probably broke all that. So I don't really have too many announcements besides Converge B-Sides. Yeah, I probably move that. Volunteer list, if you saw on the Slack channel, I sent out the volunteer link. If you fill that out, that's going to be our official list going forward for volunteers. Just easier to manage that way. Welcome. Otherwise, next month we're going to be doing lightning talk. So if you have a 10-minute lightning talk presentation that you'd find interesting or want to give, let me know and I'll put you up. We'll start getting that together for next month. That's all I have, besides at least one bad pun joke. What did the Tin Man say when he got run over by the steamroller? Curses, foiled again. That's horrible. And with that, we turn it over to Hilary.
All right. So I am doing a talk on open source intelligence. It was suggested to me to do a little bit of an introduction of myself. So my name is Hilary. I was an investigative reporter for about 4 years, and before that I worked as a business and financial reporter. So a lot of what's inside of these slides are things that I used inside of stories that I've done, added to this fabulous book that is really cool and knows a lot more about this stuff than I do. So some of the techniques are from here. It's called the Open Source Intelligence Techniques, minus the "the." So, see how shifty I am with this stuff. I've got a couple of demos and a couple of slides that are just like kind of massive and were more just there for information. I'll put it online after if you want to really dive into what makes filing statements when you're a publicly traded company. So what is open source intelligence? Definition: publicly available, accessible sources, so anything that you could find through Google. There are a number of different softwares that do this too inside of the intelligence community. I think I just wholesaled this from Wikipedia. Anything that's publicly available that can be collected, exploited, and disseminated in a timely manner to an appropriate audience for the purpose of addressing a specific intelligence requirement. I just heard of open source intelligence a month ago, and it was funny because it was presented to me. I was trying to think of something that I could talk about. I said, well, I'm a reporter and I knit, and knitting doesn't really fit into the, I couldn't think of an application for information security in knitting, but as an investigative reporter, I know all these different websites and databases that people might not know about, and that's the definition of open source intelligence, more or less. There are a lot of different, I'm trying to look for here, government applications. The CIA maintains a number of databases along with federal and local government sources. I do not have access to these things, but they are out there. The challenges inside of it is what of all of this information that you find is relevant and where are the good sites to find it, and hopefully at the end of this presentation you'll have a few spots that you can go to. So this is even more than anything else, it's just kind of to show like there's a lot of publicly available sources. Almost all of these we're going to touch on, and I added links into this deck. So you can go through and link to a bunch of these afterwards or whenever we get the deck online. So I wanted to start with different browser extensions. I've used some of these. I haven't used all of these, but there are different ways that can make the searching of this information a lot easier. So EXIF data is just metadata that goes with photos. So a JPEG, with this EXIF viewer in Firefox, you're able to see more information about that file or other different file extensions, when it was taken, sometimes coordinates, dates, good information like that. Down the Mall is kind of a similar device as actually a couple of other different things in this slide, but it's an extension on Firefox. So you can just download a ton of files instead of one by oneing them. Copy all links is pretty self-explanatory. There were a lot of different add-ons up to and including virtual machines and VPNs and different ways to kind of mask where you are on the searching end of things as you're hitting different websites. This is kind of a little outside of the scope of the talk, but we can talk about it if you'd like. Probably, I am just learning virtual networks. This is my first semester back in school, so it might be a little over my head, but I might be able to answer questions. The idea is just that you're kind of like protecting, if you're going out and looking for things, making sure that it doesn't always point back to you. If you didn't want it to. Okay. So inside of Chrome, this one I have used Chrome Sniffer, can show different technologies or frameworks that a site is built on. So it'll show, if you're using Drupal, WordPress, different coding languages, if you have Google Analytics installed. I've used it before working with web clients if I'm making a website and they say, I want this, and they show me the site, and so I can kind of use and say, okay, well, it looks like it's built on this. Or it's this language, yada, yada, yada. I can kind of point them in the right direction. Profit was really cool. I haven't checked this one out, but it sounded really cool. If you're on a target's or a person's social media profile, it's an extension in Chrome that will pull up other social media profiles that are associated with that person. And Hunchly also seemed cool, but it wasn't free, so I didn't try it. But it will have... basically, it's a way to categorize. If you're going through and you're searching for a ton of different information, it's one way to kind of categorize things and keep it neat. So at the end of the day, you don't just have this massive folder of stuff. If any of you guys have used sites or things that I mentioned or are able to talk about them in more depth and you want to jump in, please feel free. Some of this was surface. Some of this I have used before a lot more. Going into search terms, Google dorking, which I just learned. So I don't even know if it's so cool to say. It's okay. All right. Which is searching specific sites using search operators, certain file types. You can use Google Advanced Search, which will give you a date range, a time range, containing or excluding. And they also have different operators. So you could try to, that first example would be looking to see if there's a WordPress folder inside of a site and somewhere in the URL. I grabbed a couple of examples. I don't know how quick this will switch in or not. So we'll find out 5 minutes later. That one is just kind of a list of different commands that you can use. Let me see if I can speed it up on my end. There we go. It's from, all right, that's the second example. Oh my goodness. You wouldn't think that this was my first time doing this. What's with the what?
What are you trying to show?
I was trying to get to my examples. I just pulled them up funny. Let's see. Okay, custom searches. Intel Techniques, which is the purveyor of this book, had a bunch of demos, which was just nice because things I didn't have to build myself. So if we were going to search for, here, we'll search for me.
You might need to swap presentation.
Oh, right, yeah, so you guys can't see what I'm doing.
Magical.
I'm like, yeah, just trust me and I'll come back to the screen. Can I just...
Windows key P?
Windows what?
Windows P?
Press escape.
Heyo. There we go. Okay, so the custom social network search, here they just have different tabs for different networks. I have a public Facebook page from when I was actively reporting, so you would find that. There's also a Hilary Farrell who does hair and makeup design. It is not me. There's another Hilary Farrell who's a PhD candidate, also not me. Not yet. We're in that big ol' associates first. But you can, the idea is you can kind of toggle through all these different networks and just target them specifically. If you look, there I am on LinkedIn. I feel kind of weird, like, let me show you information about myself during this social engineering presentation, but here we are. Can I just pop this up? Can you guys, yep, you're there seeing it. Let's see. Heyo. All right. So now we're starting all over. Okay. Other basic web resources and searches. There's the Wayback Machine. I figured most of you had heard of that before. Google Cache Results, which will show as you're searching, so you can look to see from an earlier time. The Library of Congress U.S. News Directory has a lot of information and goes all the way back to, I don't know, like 1700. So I mean, there's some pretty in-depth opportunities that you can have there. There's also the newspaper archive, and they give a free trial, their paid software. Old Fulton, which I haven't tried but came from the book, same idea, a bunch of just a database with a lot of different news articles to search through. And then there's LexisNexis, which is kind of the king of a lot of this stuff, which is not free, but is usually free if you have a library card. So you can get books and DVDs and access to LexisNexis. There's also the Google News Archives. And this one was kind of fun. I didn't end up URLing it, but it's just millionshort.com and milliontall.com. Their way to toggle your searches based on most popular or least popular by website. So if you search Google right now, you're more likely to surface on something that is a well-known, SEO chunky site, and this will basically just flip that for you. So you can see sources that you might not have seen otherwise. You can also search by FTP. The examples there, and then that picture it's an FTP search for, is that one confidential? I did one for Penguin, not even thinking of the Linux ramifications, and I stumbled on some massive presentation from the state of Idaho that somehow had like something to do with Linux inside of it. It was like water system. It was weird. I felt like I was in the wrong place, like I wasn't invited, but it was kind of funny. So play around with that. I really liked that search. This is the Freedom of Information Act, which is a good tool in Journalist Toolkit, and also I think for any sort of intelligence gathering. The Freedom of Information Act allows you to request information from government bodies. That could be your local city council or your state government or the federal government. There's a link to template help. You can literally just copy paste this. This is what it will show for Michigan. So you're writing a letter. You want to be as specific as possible when you're requesting things. The rule is government agencies, they don't have to create something that doesn't already exist. So you might not want to ask for a database of this thing, but it's usually pretty safe if you're just asking for certain words in these types of communications, or just getting it as specific as you can without possibly returning things that just don't exist, because it'll come back as non-responsive even if they do have the information. Not that they would know or not know that, it's just how it can be kind of finicky. The governmental agency has 5 business days to respond to you, to either say, yes, we have this information, and we will give it to you, whatever, or if it's a really simple search, maybe, yes, we have this information, and here you go. Or if they need more time, they're supposed to let you know within 5 business days. You can also request, that you're a member of the public and what your work is for the public interest. Some agencies are a lot more amenable to that than others. As a public media reporter, I have never not had to pay, but I am usually expedited, if that makes sense. If you're working with a media person, they tend to try to make sure that you're taken care of, so you stop calling them. So it's possible, requesting in the public interest, to have them waive the fee. The rule is they're allowed to ask for an hourly rate of whatever the lowest paid employee is who can deal with that request. So usually the caveat of that is maybe the lowest person is their attorney, or the lowest person is an executive. And so they're going on that hourly rate plus fringe per hour. And there are some nominal page fees that they're allowed to charge as well, even if they're giving it to you digitally, which is kind of weird. But some laws just haven't caught up to where we are today in terms of technology. All that said, most departments are going to make this super easy for you. They have 5 business days to get back to you. You can also request, hey, let me know if it's going to cost more than $50, just so I can plan ahead. Easy things are not going to cost you a whole lot of money or time, and I have yet to meet someone who is, whoever the FOIA administrator is, I've yet to meet someone who gives any kind of pushback as far as, well, you shouldn't have access to this. So it's pretty easy. The second note was Michigan's one of only a couple states. There might be more states that are governor exempt, but right now you can't FOIA communications from legislators or the governor. So there was a Legislative Open Records Act that got somewhere in the House last year, but kind of died in session. There's been more recent movement on that as well, so that might be a possibility in the future. As of now, you cannot FOIA your state government people, representatives, or the governor. So this was just kind of an example. Someone had actually suggested, well, I'll just go FOIA something and I'll let you guys know how it went. But then it was like Thursday of last week and I didn't have time. But I promise it's really easy and cool, and you can get just any kind of information you could possibly need. So this is an example from a story I did. Secretary of State is who I submitted the request to. It's similar to FOIA, they just call it something different. It's a different paperwork process. So other departments, you'll see that too. They might not specifically have FOIA. They have some other named system that they go through. What I was needing was access to a vehicle history. I had the VIN number, and I wanted to know where else it went. I was trying to track down a salvage car that was possibly a bad sale. And it turns out, thanks to these documents, someone also rolled the odometer back 70,000 miles, which is just the example up there. So it's an example of, this is just one random use of public information. Vehicle history will provide all records of sale that touch the state. So like if it's from Indiana, you need to ask them separately. They'll give you names and businesses of owners up to that point, people who have signed on the documents. You get a copy of the title, as well as the mileage and odometer. You can request on any VIN. It doesn't have to belong to you or not belong to you. Doesn't really matter. It costs $8 per responsive request. So this cost me $32, but I got it in a day, and I would never have gotten my hands on it otherwise. Most states have similar rules across any, the Indiana's going to have a Secretary of State. They just might call it something different. It might be a different person for you to talk to, but it's pretty similar. Another example that I didn't put in here, but I had thought of when we were talking, was birth records and death records. Those would be through your county clerk. I would say maybe at least 75% of the time that I needed some sort of record, I just asked the person directly. I didn't have to go through FOIA. They gave it to me if they had it. They didn't if they didn't. I don't know what that would be like as just a resident, but I think in some ways you guys might have an advantage there, especially if it's something local. If you're a resident of the city of Jackson and you want information about the city of Jackson, I would at least like to think that the government would be super responsive to that. Yeah. A couple of spots for business intelligence. Michigan has the licensing and registration database, which has information on every single business that is doing business in some way in Michigan. So even if you're not headquartered here, if you do business in the state of Michigan, you have to be filed through them. All that information is on a database online. I non-ironically called it my favorite website for a long time, and it's still in the top 5 just because of the sheer amount of information that's there. It's not very user-friendly, and I suspect it's built in an older version of Java, but that's kind of a talk for another time. But it does exist, and on the next slide I'll have a URL toggle to there. So we'll see if I can sveltely and swiftly move to that once the link is there. The other was for publicly traded companies, which is just a variety of information that the Securities and Exchange Commission requires any publicly traded company to file. There's just tons and tons of information. I think I might have an example of investor relations after, so let's see. This would be a Lara Business Search in Action. I looked for containing bugaboo because I couldn't think of any business that I really wanted to look up. And there are a significant amount of business, more than I thought, more than one page of businesses in Michigan that have bugaboo somewhere in their name, which was surprising. And then just in terms of personally identifiable information, I tried to get that blocked out as best as I could because that just felt like the right thing to do. So, this might not even work I think it has to be in Firefox. This is available through the Licensing and Regulatory Affairs, but it's not very easy to find on their website. So you're really easier off just Googling Michigan Lara, SR Core, BCS Core. Oh man, still. You guys will just have to trust me. What did I want to do with this? Escape? Oh.
You have to click the PowerPoint.
Let's see. Heyo. Okay. So here's our database. You can search by name, by keyword, or identification number. Consumers Energy was before, but you guys there were like 100. I mean, it just wasn't even worth. I was trying to build some of this around Consumers Energy, not because I'm elite, but because Consumers Energy is a really interesting example of a private company that's publicly traded that does a lot of business with the government. So you can't FOIA Consumers Energy, but you could FOIA a township that's doing business with Consumers Energy to get that information. Not that you want information about Consumers Energy, but if you did, it's just really, really fascinating hybrid. So as you can see, I've looked for, I'm really glad there wasn't something, I'm glad that we touched on Bugaboo, I think, before we got here. So I don't know, I'm trying to, because it's not very, here, we'll just do Consumers Energy. That might just be easier. There's not like any trade secrets here, right? It's, so if you go through, you click on this, you go to your view document images, and then there's just a ton of them, but there will be, usually we'll see, every year you have to file to renew your license, and if you get down far enough, you have the initial paperwork that was filed for your business. Consumers Energy very likely goes through a foreign proxy, which would make sense. You guys are a big company. You probably have people who help you deal with the paperwork. A small business who's just starting out, if you're trying to get in touch with them, more often than not, their initial paperwork will probably have the name of the person. You can also get, if there's shareholders, you can get the information on the shareholders on this. You can get contact information of any officers that are listed. And there will always be a registered agent, which helped me as a reporter because at the least I had a person that I could call that had some contact with this business. So that is mostly what I use this for. But you can get some business financials as well as names of people who are associated with the company. It's super fun. I really do just unironically really like that website. There's so much information. All right. Okay, so we talked a little bit about business intelligence. Almost every publicly traded company will have some sort of forward-facing investor relations that should be pretty clear because they want investors to invest in the company. They want to be able to get in touch with people who are interested in investing in their company. The other is just to go to Edgar if you're looking for documents in particular. Edgar is the SEC's kind of data portal, for lack of a better word. There's a link there that kind of goes through what the heck is this database and what sort of information can I find. That's really helpful. And there's an Investopedia link. There might be one that might be in the next slide too, that just kind of spells out like, these are the forms. Because there are a lot of forms. And these are just kind of like a few of them that you may be more likely to find information that you want. And I tried to make that as brief as possible, but we're not going to go through all of them, especially because I don't want anyone to fall asleep. But at the very bottom, if you want to find salaries easily, it's Form DEF14A. So if you want to find the salaries of the officials in the company, which is a requirement for annual reports, that is the form. And so that's an example. Compensation for Netflix officers, just public information. So if you're ever curious, this we're also not going to go through the whole thing. It's just a little note before you get too in the weeds on fiscal years. City governments, county government, state government, federal government, and businesses, they're all going to have different definitions of the term fiscal year. So the idea is just, like for right now in Jackson, we are currently in fiscal year 2017, which makes sense because it's 2017. But on July 1st, we'll be in fiscal year 2018. So their calendar goes June to July. Most, well, 2/3 of companies will generally follow end of December to beginning of January. Other companies won't. The reason any of this is important at all is when you're information gathering, companies are required to file on their quarter and on their year. So if you're looking for HP, you need to be looking in 60 days plus November 1st versus 60 days plus January 1st for 2/3 of the other companies. If you're looking for city information, you're going to get a lot of really good stuff leading into the signing of the budget for the next year, because that's when they're talking about all their new contracts that are coming up. That's when they're trying to figure out, okay, we have this much money for this. This is what we think we can afford. I'm a really big nerd for city data, and I always get really excited whenever anyone wants to go to a city commission meeting, because I think that it's like local news is just really important. But soapbox aside, if you're interested in learning anything about, I can't think of a really good reason why you might need to collect a dossier on a city. But if you're doing state, if you're trying to decide if your company is a multinational and you're trying to figure out what state would put you in the best position, annual financial documents would be a great place to start. And so these will be for your reading leisure another time. And these are just some other websites for government/public information. The Black Book Online, I wasn't as impressed with. I did a search with a couple of names, and I did find, knowing who my target was ahead of time, I did find sites that likely them in a couple of the searches, but there seemed to be a lot of noise outside. So I would maybe use it after you've narrowed down a couple of things, like what city does this person likely live in, or what city did they live in if you're looking for information from a previous city. There's Pacer, which is the federal court registry. So you can get any sort of federal docket filings. It's not free. It costs $10 a page of returnable results. So there's also Recap, which is a free repository that you can search while you're searching Pacer and see if someone else has already pulled it down and put it into the free search. Save a couple bucks. Also, if you, this is anecdotal, there was a quarter that I spent less than $5 on Pacer and they didn't charge me. So I think if you're just on it for one specific thing, maybe they won't run the card. But I don't actually know. I'm pretty sure no one from Pacer's waiting to charge my $3.80, but I'll let you know if I'm wrong.
I just tweeted them.
Yeah, it's just add them. I'll add you. State and federal criminal databases. Michigan's is called Otis. You search by name. You can search by active status, parolee, suspended. If you have a person in mind that you're collecting intelligence on, that's another tool. You can also search by name in city council meetings, which can be surprisingly relevant. So it doesn't have to be city council. Any sort of public body will have someone who's recording the minutes, and inside of that, anyone who's speaking at the meeting, their name will generally be recorded as well. So I have had some pretty interesting interviews with people where I ran their name first, and they ended up being, they were the guy who showed up at every single meeting for years. So it can give you a little bit of context on a person and what they're interested in or not interested in. The next is property records. Kyle is an example. I blocked everyone else out. Everyone, you generally get anyone who's on the deed. So if you're signing it with your partner, you'll get both names, clearly the address. Different taxable statuses, number of properties, possibly property history, sales history. Some of this depends on what search engine you're using. BSNA is kind of a leading provider of this stuff. They run a government portal, and they have a lot of links to, at least inside of Michigan, they have like 2/3 of the counties. Some in Florida, but there are other ones. There are other vendors that do this kind of thing, and then some, especially like smaller townships will have their own portal on top of that too. Not all of them are free. Most of them are free, unless you're looking for something in a very tiny township. You can probably find it for free. If not through there, then maybe like the county's GIS mapping. You can also just go into the assessor's office, and in my experience, assessors do not get a ton of outside visitors, so they might be helpful. It's almost like kind of novel, showing up and asking for random information. I've never had a problem. Some cities are better than others. The city of Grand Rapids actually has a huge archive that's its own building, and you can go there for if you're trying to redo your property, they have records that go back to the 1800s, and it's fascinating, but outside of the scope of the conversation. I think I have an example of, so this is through BSNA, through the Access MyGov dashboard. Down at the bottom, Access MyGov is BSNA. So this is an example of Grand River Brewery. You have the owner and taxpayer information. Then you have the customer information from the utility bill, and it didn't seem appropriate to just put names out there, but
Except for mine.
except for yours. But I blocked the other. I blocked the other ones. I didn't even know who they were. Um, so this is just a really quick demo since we're talking about property records, and I love property records, and it's not going to do it from there. So hold on, third time's the charm with this stuff. Let's exit out. Didn't work.
Click on PowerPoint to escape.
Hey-o.
Where did you go?
Nope. I get so excited when I see it on mine. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so this is a map I made coming up on 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. I'm trying to see if I can get rid of this side thing. See if there's like a hover that lets me break it out. I guess not. No, there's more information about it. Does this also show online? So like it's, okay, cool. Sorry to anyone online who's just like watching my PowerPoint and I forget to switch over. This is pretty much every single property in the city of Saginaw. The red were owned by the land bank. Well, property that went through the demolition. Yeah, we can scroll that down. Purple, Saginaw County Treasurer owned. Yellow was planned demolitions. Red was owned by the land bank. By processing all of this information, and this didn't even touch into like mortgage foreclosure. This is just tax foreclosure. And it was current as of, I want to say 2013. It would have been 4 years ago. That is every single property in the city of Saginaw that is vacant. And it's crazy when you look at just like, it's thousands of them. I think it's like close to 4,000. And again, that's without mortgage foreclosures. So the numbers, when you added city-owned properties such as school districts and municipal buildings and things like that, it was close to between 20 and 25% of all city properties weren't paying taxes. So there was a larger conversation at that time about, why is there no money? We're cutting off police officers. We can't mow these lawns. We can't take care of this. We can't take care of that. We're running out of money. But looking at it in this way, close to a quarter of your tax base isn't paying taxes. So it was just an interesting way to kind of talk about, large shifts in cities. But if you were to, and I was a radio reporter at the time, so I went to my bosses to pitch this story, and as soon as I started talking about amortized 2012 property tax rates, everyone falls asleep. But if you could show a map and say, this is what I'm talking about, all of a sudden it feels a lot more relevant. So that was one example of, hey, this is a pretty way to make sense out of just a massive amount of information. All right, so past property records. What do we have next? Just some OSINT software tools. I've tried about a third of these. So I can't vouch for every single one of them, but they do all come highly recommended. There's also a link down there that has most of these, and I think maybe a couple others. Thanks, Kyle. Maltego is, correct me if I think it comes with Cali, right? Okay. And that may be kind of similar to the FOCA. I haven't been able to play with it much, but you can do transformations, right? Kind of. So it kind of like, instead of having a massive amount of data that you're visualizing, it kind of visualizes relationships based on a target that you're interested in. MetaGoofil is kind of like a command line version of the Google dorking, where you have a target website and it will strip certain file extensions that it finds, then it can exfiltrate all of them to your destination folder of desire. Google hacking database, so it's just Google dorking, just different codes that you can use to get better information. The social engineer toolkit is a link. It's from socialengineer.org, the community resources. So it's just a lot of different stuff that you can find there to learn more. And then I was going to do a quick demo of FOCA, which stands for Fingerprinting Organizations with Collected Archives. It is also SEAL in Spanish, which was on purpose. Like the developers went with that as a selling point. I could not find much in the way of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a user manual in English. So a lot of this was just kind of me looking at it, but it's kind of like a GUI version of MetaGoofil or some other programs. So this is an example. You have let's see, when you start, you can name your project, and then you just pick a website that you want it to look at. You can add alternative domains too if you know connections between different websites. Choose your save folder of choice. This has already been done. What it does is it will pull all documents on a variety of extensions that it finds based on the extensions over here, and it'll pull from Google and Bing search results with the URL. I get the feeling that this stalls because I've never been able to get it to download maybe more than 349 at one time, and these are websites that would have far more than 349 total documents. So there might be multiple searches that you have to do, but what's kind of cool is you go into your summary and you can see a bunch of different users, printers that are associated with those users, folders that are associated with those printers and with the user accounts. You can see operating systems that people are on, which may give you different conclusions about whatever company you might be looking at. It also tries to piece together different things about the network based on the metadata from the documents that you pulled. So it's pretty powerful, and I was playing it with it last night, and I felt like I should put on nicer pants because I was about to get arrested. But it's all publicly available information, right? Like you're not doing anything wrong. That was a laugh part. I was waiting for oh, she's so funny. All right. But it's really cool. And so I did it with a bunch of different websites. It will find hundreds of pieces of information and kind of just helps you make sense of it. You can also get a lot of different ideas about kind of how the company is organized. You get a list of email accounts that you can do further research on, and things of that nature. I think the last was just kind of talking about data use inside of that. I use Tableau. It's another free piece of software. This is a map of donations to Attorney General Bill Schuette over, I think it was a year. I picked him because he just had he had the most information. And the FEC has gotten really good at, I think it's called 18F. You guys know about, it's maybe. They're programmers. It's a company. They work with the government to make the government's data more accessible, get them up to speed. They have a lot of really cool projects, but they worked with the FEC to open up their data portal. And so this is FEC data, basically. And so it's just kind of what are some things that you can do with these hundreds of thousands of records. One thing I did do here is I removed addresses and phone numbers. But every single one of these dots, it doesn't have a dollar sign, but that's 30,000 for Midland. If you go to your data viewer, you can see the full data, and you can see names, you can see companies, you can see when did they donate, how many times did they donate, how much money did they donate. And again, this is just from FEC, so you can do that with any politician that you're interested in. Bill Schuette just happened to be, because he had the most donors, and I was looking for a meaty data set. This is pretty easy to figure out. I like the interface. They do have a pro version, which is probably even nicer and more powerful, but I haven't needed anything more than that. These will help you generate your topography map. So you just bring your dimensions in. City is here. Sum is the size. So the size of the circle kind of corresponds with how big it is. The circles aren't as cool as I hoped that they would be, just because the total amount difference is $1 to, what is it, 63,595. So there's not a whole lot of room for extra goodies. There is another software program called ArcGIS, which I think is a little more visually appealing. And let's see, can I just... All right, what was it? Control, F1?
Left click.
Left click. I get nothing. Wait, let me see if it works if I get out of it. Da-da-da. No, I can't even PowerPoint. I think I can just tell it to there. Ha! Maybe.
Right click.
Right click. So this is ArcGIS, and I think it's prettier. But to each their own. And this is free too. This one's actually very user friendly, so it shouldn't take you too long at all to kind of figure out what's going on. And this is visualizing childhood lead poisoning rates in the state of Michigan for 2015, which is a data set on the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. So yeah. Do you guys have any questions, comments, concerns outside of my just kind of general inability to PowerPoint? No? Is it cool? Not terrible? Hey! There's at least one thumbs up, so I can appreciate that. Cool. Are there other tools that you guys know of that I didn't cover that would be interesting? Because a lot of this was just like me kind of learning more about all this stuff. And it was like, when I discovered FOCA, I slept, but reluctantly, because it was just so cool to be able to see all that information out there. All right, well, thank you so much. And thank you, Kyle, for the hub. That was amazing.
No problem. Yeah. Just remember, next month is going to be lightning talk. So think of a topic, 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, and let me know. Please. And we'll go from there. Otherwise, see you guys later. Bye.